Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Quran for Ramadan. We will today study some verses from Surah Bani Isra'il, to be specific, verses 22 to 25. And we start off, لا تجعل مع الله إلها آخر فتقعد مذموما مخذولا وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا إما يبلغن عندك الكبر أحدهما أو كلاهما فلا تقل لهما أف ولا تنهرهما وقل لهما قولا كريما واخفض لهما جناح الذل من الرحمة وقل رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا ربكم أعلم بما في نفوسكم إن تكونوا صالحين فإنه كان للأوابين غفورا. Listen, serve no other deity except God, lest on the day of judgment we are left blameworthy and helpless. Your Lord has enjoined you to worship none but Him, and to treat your parents very well. If either or both of them attain old age before you, show them no signs of impatience, nor scold them while answering. Speak to them with respect, and with softness lower arms of tenderness on them, and keep praying, Lord, be merciful to them the way they nursed me with love and tenderness in childhood. People, your Lord fully knows what is in your hearts. If you remain obedient, He is very forgiving to those who turn to Him. This passage of Surah Bani Israel, which will go up to verse 39, is a very comprehensive passage in the sense that it actually spells out the 10 commandments of the Quran. So we've heard of the 10 commandments of the Old Testament, and you'll find similar commandments in the Quran with a different ring to them and some additions to them as well. And these 10 commandments can be enumerated. Today we'll study until verse 25, and tomorrow, inshallah, we'll study the rest of this passage. And as we will conclude this passage tomorrow, you will see how these 10 commandments have really been effectively and comprehensively enshrined in these verses. As is the case with the Quran, that it starts off all these important directives, especially related to morality, with this directive of Tawheed, and to safeguard ourselves from incriminating ourselves from any traces or any semblance of polytheism. So polytheism is something which dents the very foundation of our religion, and that is why when such moral directives are given, the Almighty generally starts off with this caution, and He wants us to be on our guard. And that is why the words are لا تجعل مع الله إلها آخر فتقعد مذموما مخذولا. So serve no other deity except God, lest on the day of judgment you are left blameworthy and helpless. About polytheism, we know that the Quran has said that this is a falsehood which is imputed to God, iftara Allah. The reason here is that if anyone could have told us that he has partners, or God has partners, it would have been God Himself, because this information is something that we on our own selves could not have become aware of unless we were told or we were informed of it. So God says that in the absence of my informing you that I have no partners, if you make up partners, then they are bound to be false partners, and this is a falsehood that you impute upon me. And this was the greatest charge sheet which the Quran presented against the idolaters of Mecca in the times of the Prophet. They were told that if they associate partners with God, then they should present a proof that where has God told them, or where has God enumerated them, or where has God picked out those partners, and how do they know that they are partners? So they are basically self-styled deities. They have been made up, they have been fabricated. And that is why the wrath of God against polytheism, it is something about which we all know that He has said that He will forgive everything, or He can forgive anything except any deliberate polytheism that a person is guilty of. If he is deliberately associating partners with God, then God help him. In other words, even God will not help him on the day of judgment. So very important that we are able to make ourselves pure in this belief, and also to be on the safe side, we also need to understand that in spite of being monotheists, in spite of being upholders of the creed of monotheism, at times we might indulge into acts of polytheism, and we have to be on guard. For example, we cannot pray, or we cannot ask for anything from anyone else except God. If we need to ask for someone for something, it has to be directly from God. If we go to someone else and make that person a means to reach the Almighty, then this is also polytheism. Similarly, if we are superstitious in some respect, that also has a trace of polytheism in it, because in that case, our faith is not strong in God. And of course, there are other things as well. So to be on guard on all such accounts is absolutely essential. Also, I would like to point this out, and I've already done so in some of our previous sessions, but it is very important to note that people can be monotheists and at the same time be guilty of polytheism, but that does not make them polytheists. So, a polytheist is a person who admits to polytheism. So, unless a person admits to polytheism, he cannot be regarded a person who is a polytheist. This is exactly what had happened in the times of Prophet Muhammad, when the Nazarenes, or they were later called as Christians, they although were guilty of polytheism because of the fact that they regarded Jesus to be the Son of God, but because of the fact that they said that they are monotheists, and they actually interpreted this creed of Trinity, and said that this is a one God which has three Godheads, and some complicated uh, uh, interpretation that they would make. But the fact is that the Almighty did say that, well, this is not acceptable, but they were not regarded as polytheists at all. As I said, the reason being that they themselves did not regard themselves to be polytheists, and they, although invented a crooked monothology, I would say, but the Quran still honored that and did criticize this act of polytheism, but never regarded them to be polytheists. The next thing which is mentioned in these verses is قَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Your Lord is enjoined on you to worship none but Him and to treat your parents very well or with kindness. Again, we know that as far as the Quran is concerned, the rights of the parents on most occasions are mentioned right after the rights of the Almighty. And this shows the importance which parents have, the importance that they have to, in all counts, be respected. On all counts, they have to be shown regard, and we must not in any way be impetuous towards them. And the first thing which is mentioned even before parents are mentioned, of course, is وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا, which means that because God is one, as has been just said in the previous verse, therefore your Lord has enjoined you that you worship none but Him. Only He is worthy of worship, because He is the one who has created you, He is the one who is nurturing you, He is the one who is looking after you and providing you with sustenance and livelihood. And the next thing is juxtaposed just after it, is that you have to treat your parents with kindness, because parents are as a figure of speech, they are an extension of God's mercy. The way God looks after us in a very human plane, it is these parents who look after us. God Himself has created for us these parents, and you can see how the words are wabil walidaini ihsana, and then later on in this verse, something very important is mentioned, and that is something that we all also come across very commonly, which is that when parents get older, they get irritable, they get jittery. In fact, they behave as children, which actually at times makes their adult children irritable as well. So they get disappointed, they get frustrated, and when they express childish desires, the adult childrens, they scold them back, or they talk back to them in a very impolite way. And because this happens often, so the Quran has made it a point to advise all people who reach this stage of life in which they have old parents. So the words are that if one or either of them, they reach old age in front of you, فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ, do not be don't show any sign of impatience to them, do not scold them. So the word "uf" is something which is very significant here. It does not mean that you cannot disobey parents, which is generally thought of as the word "uf" is referred to the fact that you just cannot say anything against your parents, meaning that you cannot disobey them. But the fact is that in the Arabic language, this is not true. The word "uf" actually means to show impatience, to be impetuous, to be impolite to your parents. So when the Quran says "Fala takullahuma uffin," it only means that you should not be impetuous towards your parents. And this, in other words, is also an important area in which we have to understand that the Quran at no single place, at not a single place, has ever said that the parents need to be obeyed. Every place wherever parents are mentioned, every instance, at which parents are mentioned, you'll find the words wabil walidaini ihsana. Treat your parents with kindness. Be affectionate to them. Be considerate and sympathetic to them. These are the words which are used with parents. But obedience is one word which is never ever used in the Quran for parents. So therefore, this is also something that has to be understood, especially in Eastern cultures, uh, cultures like the subcontinent, especially in which parents hold they hold this, I would say, a dictatorial right over their children. They think that they can decide the future of their children. They can decide the spouse. They can decide the career. They can decide. In fact, they take all major decisions of the children on their behalf. And when they are questioned, they say, "Well, we are your parents. We are more experienced, and we have the right to overrule you," without realizing that this is a right that they don't have. And if they think that this verse gives them this right, then they are sadly mistaken, because this verse does not tell them that that their children cannot disobey them. What this verse does tell them, and it is absolutely befitting to understand this, is that they should not be disrespectful to their parents in any way. And the words which are used subsequently are "wala tanharhuma wa qul lahuma qawlan karima," which means that you do not scold them while answering. So if your parents speak to them, you should not in any way scold them. In fact, Quran says, وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. You speak to them in soft words. You speak to them with respect. So the point that we have to understand once again here, coming back to this very important age-old issue, that as parents, and every parent that I have come across in the better part of on my life, I have seen that they have these, I would say, dictatorial tendencies in which they overrule their children. Yes, this trend might be diminishing, but it is far from over. It is far from over. It needs to be checked. Parents think that they are somehow responsible for their children, and therefore, when they see that their children are doing wrong, they snub them, they scold them. And the thing that they don't perhaps realize is that once a child becomes an adult, once a child reaches adult age, he or she is mentally mature, then the parents have to realize that now the child is answerable for his or her own deeds directly to the Almighty. The parents are no longer responsible. Yes, they can still suggest the right course which they think out of their own experience. And uh, contrarily, we also think that the children, in all respects, should also listen to their parents' experience. Of course, they might disagree, but if they disagree and they want to follow a different path, then in all instances, parents must realize that the children have this liberty. The adult children, then they can go anyway. And if they press them, if they force them, then they are guilty, I would say, of violating a human right. And that human right is that of liberty and freedom of an adult person. So just as no one would like his or her freedom to be clamped down in any way, in a very similar way, no adult child should face this. And especially parents have to realize that they can, in all fitness of things, support their children by presenting their suggestions to them, by telling them if they're taking a wrong decision, that, well, this is how they feel. But that is all. If then their children still take a wrong decision, then the parents must support them. They must stand back and also realize that there are instances in which a person will only learn once he or she makes mistakes. And for this, parents also need to look back at their own lives, because there are certain things which they also did and they learned it the hard way. And this is a human, this is like a human treatment, I would say. It's like a human psyche as well, that there are so many things that we learn by practicing and by experience and by making mistakes. So if you don't let your child make a mistake, he or she will never learn. So what we have been told is وَخْفِزْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ, which means that with softness, lower arms of tenderness on them and keep praying. This is a beautiful prayer which the Quran has outlined here. رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Lord, be merciful to them. Be merciful to them the way they nursed me with love and affection, love and tenderness in childhood. This is a prayer that is so beautiful. It is so grand. It is so comprehensive. It is the call of every heart, that the way they nursed us. Of course, this is something which we cannot repay them in any way. Our parents, the way they nursed us, the way they looked after us, the way they sacrificed so many things for our comfort, it is something which we cannot have account of. We don't even know that. But the things that we have witnessed, they do bear witness, and they bear witness and testimony to the fact that there were a lot of things that we might not know that they still did, and they did it with the willingness of their heart, with magnanimity, and they never expressed them as a favor to us. And that is why we are called to look upon our parents in this way, that Rabbirhamhuma kama rabbayani saghira, that in this old age, O Lord, when they are passing through this second childishness, as the poet says, and when they are passing through the pangs of old age, when they are behaving as children, O God Almighty, have mercy on them, because this is an age which has its own shortcomings and limitations. So at times we might not be in a position to fully cater for them, but God, do have mercy on them. This is precisely what is mentioned right after them, and that is Rabbukum a'lamu bima fi nufusikum. So this means that your Lord fully knows what is in your hearts. In takunu salihina fa innahu kana lil awwabina ghafura. If you remain obedient, He is very forgiving to those who turn to Him, which means that people who might have something in their heart, they might have that tightness, the feeling of being at times impetuous, makes a person guilty. So the Almighty says that God knows what is in your hearts. If you feel, if you've done something wrong and you regret that, and you mend your ways, in takunu salihin, then remember that God is one who is forgiving. He is merciful. Awwabina ghafura. So He's someone to those. He's very forgiving to those who turn to Him. So this is a very object lesson in parenting and in how children should be treated, and at the same time how children should treat their parents. So with this we come to an end to these verses. Inshallah, we'll continue the rest of them tomorrow, and for now we can open our session for question answers.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for an incredible explanation of the verses. Ahmed, you may ask your question.
السلام علیکم سر.
وعلیکم السلام.
کوشچن یہ تھا کہ ہمارے یہاں کچھ این جی اوز جو ہیں وہ جب ڈونیٹ کرتے ہیں کسی بھی چیز کو غریبوں میں تقسیم کرتے ہیں, جب ان کی مدد کرتے ہیں تو وہ ساتھ میں نا پکچرز دے دیتے ہیں تاکہ جو ان کے ڈونرز ہیں وہ ان کو ٹرسٹ میں لے سکیں, اور کبھی کبھار انہیں سوشل میڈیا پر بھی پوسٹ کر دیتے ہیں تاکہ مزید لوگوں کو موٹیویٹ کیا جا سکے ڈونیشن کے لیے. تو کیا ایسا کرنا صحیح ہے؟
دیکھیے, اس کا تعلق تو حالات, واقعات اور سچویشن سے ہے. بعض کیسز میں یہ بالکل ٹھیک ہے اگر آپ کی نیت یہ ہے کہ آپ اپنی کریڈیبلٹی پیدا کرنا چاہ رہے ہیں, لوگوں کو بتانا چاہ رہے ہیں کہ ہم ٹرانسپیرنٹ ہیں, جس چیز کے لیے آپ نے پیسے دیے ہیں ہم نے اسی میں خرچ کیے ہیں, اس حد تک تو یہ ٹھیک ہے. اور اس کے لیے موضوع تو پھر یہی بنتا ہے کہ جس نے ان کو ڈونیشن دی ہے وہ انہیں کو بھیجیں. اگر فیس بک پہ وہ لگاتے ہیں یا کسی سوشل میڈیا پلیٹ فارم پہ لگاتے ہیں تو اس کی کوئی اچھی قوی وجہ ہونی چاہیے. اصل جو چیز ہے وہ ذہن میں رکھنی ہی چاہیے کہ جب بھی آپ کوئی نیکی کریں, کوئی انفاق کا کام کریں, تو اس کے پیچھے ریا اور نمائش کا جو جذبہ ہے وہ کم سے کم وہ نہیں ہونا چاہیے بالکل. اور اگر کہیں کسی وجہ سے اس طرح کی چیزیں کرنی پڑیں تو جیسے آپ نے کہا, یا تو وہ اس لیے ہونی چاہیے کہ انسان کی کریڈیبلٹی اگر کوشچن میں آ جائے, اور یا اگر کوئی ایسا موقع ہو کہ آپ دوسروں کو ترغیب دینا چاہتے ہیں, انسپائر کرنا چاہتے ہیں تاکہ لوگ بھی اس سے انسپائر ہوں. تو یہ ایک ایسی چیز ہے کہ جس میں حالات کے لحاظ سے چیزیں ویری کرتی ہیں.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Rohan Sheikh, you may ask your question now.
تھینک یو سو مچ. سر میرا کوشچن یہ ہے کہ آپ سے واٹس ایپ پہ وہ اس میں پوچھا تھا, کفاروں سے ریلیٹڈ پوچھا تھا, تو اس کا جو آنسر آپ نے دیا تھا مجھے اس کے پیچھے جو ریزن ہے وہ نہیں سمجھ آئی تھی. اف یو کین ایکسپلین دیٹ.
نہیں, وہ تو میں نے اصل میں آپ کی خاص سچویشن کو سامنے رکھ کے لیے کہا تھا کہ جس سچویشن سے آپ گزر رہے ہیں اس کیس میں آپ کو کفارے دینے کی ضرورت نہیں ہے.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Tahira Khalik, please ask your question.
جی السلام علیکم شہزاد صاحب.
وعلیکم السلام.
جی شہزاد صاحب, میں نے یہ سوال پوچھنا تھا سورۃ نور کی آیت نمبر 26 کے بارے میں, جس میں لکھا ہوا ہے کہ خبیث عورتیں خبیث مردوں کے لیے ہیں اور پاکیزہ عورتیں پاکیزہ مردوں کے لیے ہیں.
جی,
یہ تو ظاہر ہے کہ یہ آیت دنیاوی زندگی سے متعلق نہیں, تو اگر آخرت کے بارے میں سوچیں تو پاکیزہ مردوں کے لیے پاکیزہ عورتیں تو سمجھ میں آتی ہے بات, لیکن خبیث عورتیں خبیث مردوں کے لیے مطلب انوں میں بھی نہیں مطلب سمجھ سکتے کہ ہو سکتی ہیں کیونکہ وہاں پہ تو مین اینڈ وائف کا کانسیپٹ ہوگا ہی نہیں. تو پھر اس کا کیا مطلب بنتا ہے جی؟
نہیں، میرا خیال ہے کہ یہ کہنا کہ خبیث عورتیں خبیث مردوں کے لیے یہ جہنم ہی کے واسطے سے ہے، اور وہاں پہ یہ بتایا جا رہا ہے کہ وہ جو سزا پائیں گے وہ مل کے سزا پائیں گے، اور اس حیثیت میں سزا پائیں گے کہ وہ میاں اور بیوی ہوں گے، اور ایک دوسرے کے لیے جو انہوں نے برائیاں دنیا میں کی ہیں وہ برائیاں ان کے سامنے آخرت میں آئیں گی. تو جو طیبات ہے، الطیبات للطیبین، یہ تو جس کا تعلق تو جنت سے ہے، اور الخبیثات للخبیثون کے جو الفاظ آئے ہیں اس کا تعلق جہنم سے ہے.
تو
Thank you,
آپ نے
Dr.
کہا،
Shehzad.
سوری جی، میں ذرا پوچھ سکتی ہوں یا
Yes, go
میں
on.
جی میں یہ نہیں سمجھ پا رہی کہ وہ آپ نے کہا کہ ہسبینڈ اینڈ وائف کی حیثیت سے ہی وہ سزا پائیں گے.
نہیں،
تو
میں یہ کہہ رہا ہوں کہ دنیا میں جو ان کی غلطیاں ہوئیں بطور میاں اور بیوی کے، ضروری نہیں ہے کہ یہی میاں اور بیوی وہاں ہوں. مراد صرف یہ
اچھا
ہے کہ جہنم میں برے لوگوں کو برے مردوں کو بری خواتین سے سابقہ پیش آئے گا. یہ ضروری نہیں ہے کہ وہ شادی ہی کی شکل میں پیش آئے، یعنی ایسا نہیں ہے کہ وہ وہاں پہ شادی شدہ ہوں گے اور اس کے بعد ان کو سزا دی جائے گی، بلکہ یہ ہے کہ وہ وہاں پہ اکٹھے ہوں گے، یعنی برے مردوں کو بری عورتوں کے ساتھ اکٹھا کر دیا جائے گا، اور پھر وہ مل کے سزا پائیں گے.
اچھا
تو
جی،
جی
تھینک یو.
اکٹھا ہونے کا یہ
Thank
مطلب
you,
نہیں ہے
Dr.
کہ ان کی
Shehzad.
شادی ہو جائے گی.
صحیح. Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Ibad Ajmal, you may ask your question.
السلام علیکم ڈاکٹر شہزاد. اچھا ڈاکٹر صاحب، آپ نے بولا تھا ابھی کہ سم ٹائمز چلڈرن وہ اپنی غلطیوں سے ہی سیکھتے ہیں، اینڈ یو ہیو ٹو لیٹ دیم گو تھرو دیز مسٹیکس. دیٹ از ویری انڈرسٹینڈیبل. ناؤ اب میں کبھی کبھی سوچتا ہوں کہ the mistakes that I went through, so میں نے اپنے آپ کو اتنا سالڈ کر دینا ہے in my faith, in my the wherever I live life, تاکہ میرے بچے کبھی وہ غلطیاں نہ کر سکیں. ناٹ بیکاز آؤٹ آف کہ میں نے ان کو بالکل سیدھا رکھنا ہے، بٹ بیکاز I don't want them to get hurt in any manner. So how do you navigate through this situation? کیونکہ انیویٹیبل ہے کہ انسان کچھ غلطیاں کرتا ہی ہے.
نہیں دیکھیں، یہ اس نیویگیشن کو پاسبلٹی ہی تب ہے وین یو لیٹ دیم میک مسٹیکس. دیکھیں زندگی جو ہے وہ نام اس چیز کا ہے کہ بعض چیزیں آپ سیکھتے ہیں دوسروں کی غلطیوں سے، اور بعض چیزیں آپ سیکھتے ہی اپنی غلطیوں سے ہیں. تو آپ اپنے بچوں کو جتنا بھی پروٹیکٹ کر لیں فیوچر میں، وہ پروٹیکشن جو ہے وہ اس درجے میں تو ٹھیک ہے کہ آپ ان کو اچھائی اور برائی کے بارے میں بتائیں، ان کی جو نشو و نما آپ کریں، لیکن اس کے بعد ان کو تھوڑا سا آزاد چھوڑ دیں اور ان کو غور کر لینے دیں کہ جو آپ نے ان کو بتایا ہے وہ کس حد تک اس کو وہ خود برت سکتے ہیں. اس کے بعد اگر وہ نہیں برت سکے یا ان سے غلطی ہو گئی یا مسلسل ہو رہی ہے، تو اس پر یعنی جو ہے نا کریکشن کا میکانزم، یہ خود ایک آرٹ ہے کہ آپ بچے سے جب غلطی ہو جاتی ہے تو آپ نے اس کو کس طرح سے اس کو درست کرنا ہے، یا ہر وقت ڈانٹنا ہے یا کوئی انسینٹیو دینا ہے اس کو. یعنی یہ پورا ایک موضوع ہے کہ جو چائلڈ کریکشن ہے یہ بلکہ چائلڈ سائیکالوجسٹ جو ہیں اس کے بارے میں بہت ساری مفید آپ کو مشورے دیتے ہیں، آپ ان کو دیکھ بھی سکتے ہیں، آپ مجھ سے براہ راست مشورہ کر سکتے ہیں. تو یہ ایک پوری آرٹ ہے، جیسے پیرنٹنگ ایک آرٹ ہے، اسی طرح کریکشن جو ہے ریگارڈنگ ہاؤ ٹو کریکٹ یور چلڈرن، ہاؤ ٹو جب مجھ سے خاص طور سے غلطی ہو جائے تو کس طرح سے ان سے ہمیں معاملہ کرنا ہے، اور اگر ریپیٹڈ غلطیاں ہو رہی ہیں تو کیسے کرنا ہے. تو اس اسکل کو ہمیں اصل میں سیکھنا ہے.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. I just want to add one more thing. آپ نے ایک بک بھی لکھی ہے اس کے اوپر. So if anyone wants to read that.
رائٹ، جو آپ نے کتاب کا اشارہ کیا اس کا نام ہے ماڈرن چیلنجز ٹو پیرنٹنگ. تو آپ میں سے جو لوگ اگر دیکھنا چاہیں تو میں نے اس میں یہی کوشش کی ہے کہ جو کریکشن کا میکانزم ہے وہ، پیرنٹنگ کے جو پرنسپلز ہیں وہ، اور جو فیوچر میرج کے لحاظ سے بچوں کے اندر جن کو ذمہ داریاں پیدا ہونی چاہیے یا شعور ہونا چاہیے کہ واٹ میرج از آل اباؤٹ، تو وہ چیز آپ دیکھ سکتے ہیں اس کتاب.
Thank you. Rafia Khwaja, you may ask your question now.
And Dr. Shehzad, recently it came out in the newspaper that 3 female students had been arrested in Dera Ismail Khan for killing their school teacher. These students were of a madrasa, and they killed their school teacher at the gate because one of the girls' relatives had dreamt that the school teacher had done blasphemy. Now, it is they are in jail, but what horrified me is what are we doing to our religion, and how come these madrasas are not in the control of the government, that such things can happen openly in the schools and nobody can control it?
But this is a very sorry state of affairs, and madrasas and our pulpits both are guilty of that. And the way extremism is spreading, and especially misinformation and disinformation about the law of blasphemy, is something which is very, very, we have to be very careful about it, and we have to educate young minds regarding what blasphemy is, what constitutes blasphemy, and what are the responsibilities of a citizen. Whatever religion a person might follow. When I use the word religion, I mean whatever sect of religion he or she might follow. One thing has to be hammered in their minds, and that is no one can take the law in his or her own hands. If even a person, if he thinks or she thinks that someone has committed extreme acts and he or she is guilty of a severe punishment, then that has to be reported to the state. And no one individually, even if the state is at times slack, even then you don't have this responsibility, this obligation in any way. And if you do so, this would be a grave crime in itself, and it would be an act of terrorism if you take law in your own hands.
May I just add something that how come the parents are sending these young girls to madrasa, the young boys? Is this what they're learning at the madrasa?
Well, we just cannot say, because it's not just the madrasa which is giving this training. We have our social media. We have so many channels. We have YouTube channels. We have social media channels. We have Facebook talks. Everyone has the liberty and freedom to say whatever he or she says. So it's not just the madrasa. It's, I mean, you can open your internet and you'll find that these things are spreading just as other things are spreading. So you just cannot check them. What you can check is the education of your own children, and you try to educate them yourselves that come what may, no responsible citizen has Islam allowed to take the law in his or her own hands in any situation. You have to report any instance of crime to state authorities.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Baran, you're next. You may ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, my question is about the concept of shirk and why that is the only sin that Allah will not forgive. Because I know it's a very big sin, but for example, there are so many other sins that are also very big, like murder and rape and all stuff like that. So I would just want to know, why is shirk the sin that God will not forgive, but all the other sins He can forgive?
Because he has answered this question in his book, and he said that this is a falsehood that you are attributing to him without any proof. For all the rest of the crimes you might commit out of emotions, out of being overwhelmed with emotion, in frenzy, or maybe because of some misconception, or maybe deliberately. But this is one area in which you are doing something of which you have no proof. I just explained earlier on that had God any partners, it would have been he himself who would have communicated this fact to his creatures. And since he has not done so, so he says that anyone who associates partners with him is imputing falsehood to me. And he has no basis for that. And the Quranic words are iftara Allah. Iftara Allah means to impute a blame, a false allegation on God. So it's like imputing a false allegation. You have no proof of that. And it is basically your own whim, your own desire that you think that he has deities. He never said that I have any deity, any associate or any partner. It is the human beings themselves who come up with this figment of their fancy. So that is why the Almighty is extremely severe on this count.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. I just have a follow-up question on this. Then there are some people in the world to whom Islam never reached, or they are just they're just living in the part of the world where they worship idols or stones or the sun or anything. So they are trying to worship one God. They are not trying to, because they don't know, how to worship. So does that also count as shirk? Or
so, of course, that is something that will be debated with them. They will be questioned, because you see, the Quran has also said one other thing, and that is that before all human beings were created, all the souls were called before the Almighty. There was a huge assembly of all the souls before the Almighty, and this is in which it is said that He called all the souls, everyone who was to be born until the day of judgment was there in that assembly, and then the Almighty spoke to them and said, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And everyone answered in the affirmative. And although none of us remembers this whole scenario, but we have, when someone reminds us of this, we feel that this is our intuitive knowledge. So yes, if a person never had any knowledge of religion, or no preaching reached him, then he will be questioned on the basis of this intuitive knowledge about God. This too could have become distorted. But then, as I said, this would be a discussion between him and God.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Sumbul, you may ask your question now.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर साहब, मुझे ये पूछना था, अभी ये जो शिर्क के ऊपर क्वेश्चन हुआ है, उसमें मेरा जो कॉन्सेप्ट था वो ये था कि शिर्क इज वन ऑफ द राइट्स, यानी लाइक वी आर टेकिंग वन ऑफ द राइट्स अवे फ्रॉम अल्लाह ताला, यानी अल्लाह ताला की जो इबादत है या अल्लाह ताला से हमारे जो मामलात हैं, तो उसमें अल्लाह ताला कह रहे हैं कि यानी मैं नमाज आपने छोड़ दिया, रोजा छोड़ दिया है, आपने कोई और इबादत छोड़ दी है, तो आई विल फॉरगिव यू फॉर दैट, लेकिन शिर्क अगर करोगे तो आई वोंट फॉरगिव यू. बट अगर आप इसको कंपेयर करें विद द क्राइम्स कमिटेड अगेंस्ट ह्यूमन काइंड और अदर इंडिविजुअल्स, उसमें तो अल्लाह ताला कह रहे हैं कि एक थर्ड पार्टी है ऑलरेडी, लाइक इफ देयर इज अ रेप, इफ देयर इज अ मर्डर, तो देन इट्स नॉट जस्ट an individual and Allah Ta'ala, then there's a third party involved there. तो मुझे ये समझ आया हुआ था कि क्योंकि अल्लाह ताला के राइट्स में से this is the biggest right to like understand that, yeah, this is the biggest right to violate, that Allah Ta'ala has partners, तो वो सिर्फ उसमें दो पार्टीज हैं. So did I understand it?
आपको सही समझ में आया था. मैंने तो जो आपने समझा है उसकी बुनियाद बताई है कि जो वायलेशन की वजह क्या है, यानी क्यों इस वायलेशन को अल्लाह मियां इतना ग्रेव समझते हैं. वो उस वायलेशन को, जो उनका अपना सबसे बड़ा राइट है, उसको ग्रेव इसलिए समझते हैं कि अल्लाह ताला कहते हैं कि इसकी कोई आपके पास बुनियाद नहीं है. ये बात कि मेरे कोई पार्टनर्स हैं, ये तो इन्फॉर्मेशन मैं आपको दे सकता था, जब मैंने आपको नहीं दी तो आपने खुद घड़ ली है. तो ये अल्लाह ताला जी, तो ये उसकी सिर्फ मजीद वजाहत है.
So यानी बेसिकली जो बाकी क्राइम्स हैं, they are not related to,
जी बिल्कुल,
they are a
any other
different
crime, unless the person against whom the crime has been committed, unless that person forgives the perpetrator, God says, I'm not going to, I mean, my part will only come once that forgiveness has taken place.
Yeah, so the separation of crimes is different. Like that is one-on-one with Allah Ta'ala and the individual, and this is like there's a third party involved.
Right, correct.
Okay, thank you. Jazakallah khair.
Ahmed, you may ask your question.
सर, मुझे आपके क्वेश्चन की आंसर की समझ आ गई थी, लेकिन एक छोटी सी डाउट है मेरी कि अगर हम डोनेशन जो है सोशल मीडिया के यूजर्स के थ्रू ही ले रहे हैं, तो जाहिर सी बात है कि अगर हम वहाँ पर पोस्ट करते हैं पिक्चर्स को, तो वहाँ पर डोनर से ज्यादा जो है वो सोशल मीडिया यूजर्स उन चीजों को देखते हैं. तो इस हवाले से हमारे लिए शरीयत का क्या हुक्म है?
देखिए, मैं तो आपको उसूल बता सकता हूँ. उसके बाद ये जो एप्लीकेशन की चीज़ें हैं ना, ये तो आप खुद बेहतर इसको जज करें. असूल सिर्फ यही है कि अगर आपने किसी चीज़ को डिस्प्ले करना है, उसमें नुमाइश का पहलू कम से कम होना चाहिए, बल्कि ना होने के बराबर होना चाहिए. अगर वो कोई चीज़ ऐसी है जो डिस्प्ले में आ रही है, तो उसमें सोलली आपका जो पर्पज़ है वो यही है कि या तो जो डोनर्स हैं उनको इत्तला मिल जाए, उनको पता चल जाए कि मामला ट्रांसपेरेंट है, और या ये है कि आप और लोगों को इंस्पायर करना चाह रहे हैं, तरगीब देना चाह रहे हैं कि वो भी इस कार्य खैर में शरीक हों. ये मैं हमारे एक यहाँ पे मेरे दोस्त हैं मुश्ताक साहब, उन्होंने भी एक इंटरेस्टिंग बात बताई है कि जिनकी अपनी तस्वीरें हैं उनकी भी एक इज्जत नफ्स होती है. इस वजह से उनको भी ज़रूर देख लेना चाहिए कि जिनको आप डोनेट कर रहे हैं, अगर आप उनकी तस्वीरें डिस्प्ले कर रहे हैं सोशल मीडिया पे, तो इसमें उनकी इजाज़त होनी चाहिए, और या फिर आप कोई इसको मतलब ऐसे अंदाज से पेश कर सकते हैं कि तस्वीरें जो हैं वो छुपी हुई हों, चेहरे छुपे हुए हों, क्योंकि ऐसे चेहरे अगर आप नुमायां करेंगे सोशल मीडिया पे कि आपने इनको दिया, तो वो एक किसी की इज्जत नफ्स मजरू होती है. तो अगर आपने ये करना ही है तो आप चेहरे को कवर कर सकते हैं.
Okay, Saima Khan, you may ask your question.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम. आई वांट टू ऐड ऑन दिस कि सोशल मीडिया पे डिस्प्ले करें, सर इसकी तो सबसे ज्यादा चीज ये होती है, डॉक्यूमेंट्स प्रूफ होते हैं. पिक्चर्स में तो आप किसी को भी लाके खड़ा कर सकते हैं, लाइक द पिक्चर्स आर, द वीडियोस आर नॉट एक्चुअली द प्रूफ ऑफ लाइक यू आर डूइंग द चैरिटी. So basic thing is that basic idea that you need to prove within the document where you're spending the money, whom you are spending the money.
बिल्कुल आपने ठीक कहा. दैट इज द डॉक्यूमेंट्स, दे आर द फर्स्ट एंड द बेसिक प्रूफ. लेकिन ऐसा होता है कि एट टाइम्स व्हेन यू आर गिविंग टू अ स्पेसिफिक डोनर, टू अ स्पेसिफिक रेसिपिएंट, in which you have actually called for a donation for a specific recipient, for some patient maybe, or some sort of welfare program. تو اس میں بعض دفعہ you need to show کہ بھائی دیکھیں یہ ہاسپٹل ہے, یہ جگہ ہے. I think اس کیس میں اگر کسی انسان کی تصویر آ رہی ہے تو آپ باقی چیزوں کو رکھ سکتے ہیں, تصویر کو آپ بلاک کر سکتے ہیں, تصویر کے چہرے کو آپ بلاک, یعنی جسٹ کور اپ, تاکہ وہ فیس نظر نہ آئے, جسٹ دا فیس.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. We will be concluding our session here. Thank you all for joining and participating. See you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of the day. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.